Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haiphong. Thanks for coming out this evening. Please do hit the like button before you, or as you come on, because we have a great show for you today. Because what we're talking about is much bigger than just a scandal. We are talking about a major trap that was now being exposed by the very people who built it. Newly released Epstein emails have sent shockwaves through Trump's circle and really the entire establishment, because what's inside them reveals corruption, power, and criminality on a scale that we may have seen before, but it is only getting worse and worse as people clamor for the files. Tonight, we are joined by Professor Xueqin of Predictive History, a geopolitical analyst who connects the dots between the elites, secret societies, and the forces driving the collapse of America's empire. Professor Jian, thanks so much for coming back on the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much, Danny. Thanks so much for having me back.
Of course, of course. Well, let's get right to it. Many have been paying attention and really diving into these major email revelations. And now what we have regarding Epstein is Trump's response. And here it is. Now that the Democrats are using the Epstein hoax involving Democrats, not Republicans, to try to deflect from the disastrous shutdown, and then he goes on and on, he is going to now ask his own attorney general and the Department of Justice and the FBI to investigate Epstein's involvement with the leadership and with the relationships with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, JP Morgan, on and on and on, saying it's another Russia scam. Now, what's pretty incredible about this, Professor Jian, is that we are seeing power, I think, be exposed in real time. And I want your take on how this all works, because Donald Trump cannot run away from the fact that Jeffrey Epstein in these emails said it straight up. He said, "It is wild. I am the one to be able to take him down," referring to Donald Trump when he was being investigated in the first term that he served. So, Professor Jian, maybe you can give us an overview first of how power works. I know you've been covering secret societies. What is the conspiracy here? Because just as this was happening, you had Trump begging for Netanyahu to be pardoned, and we have a major political crisis, and of course, the collapsing American empire all coming together. Take it away.
Yeah, so these Epstein files, these emails, they're being released, and they're really enlightening, and they really illuminate for us how power works. So I will give a structural overview of what these emails reveal to us, okay? The first thing it reveals to us is that all these people in power, the elite, they're all friends with each other. So in public, the Democrats and Republicans, they can be fighting each other, but in reality, they go to the same schools, they go to the same parties, they're just friends with each other. So what you're seeing in public, the sort of like political struggle in public, it's all just fake. It's like wrestling. It's reality TV. The elite are all friends with each other. That's the first thing. Second thing that we've noticed about the emails is how cavalier the elite are. They think that they're above everyone else. They think they're untouchable. So they just speak their minds freely. Jeffrey Epstein, he was using Gmail in order to make all these sensitive communications. There was absolutely no operational security. He didn't really care because he believed he was untouchable. And that's how the elite think and behave. They live in a bubble. They think that they control the world, and they're untouchable. So they can do whatever they want. And all that matters is staying within this bubble, staying close to each other. The third thing I will say is that these emails don't tell us, but we can assume that there are many layers of networking among the elite. So Jeffrey Epstein, why was he so popular among the elite? Well, first of all, he was just a friendly guy who did a lot of networking and was able to bring the elite together. But if you go to Epstein Island, you will find that there's a temple there that's almost designed for ritual sacrifice. So what I've researched and what I've discovered is that the way that the elite stay together is through rituals, secret society rituals. Why? Because at the end of the day, if you're part of the elite, your biggest problem is trust. How can you trust that person to not rat you out in this political struggle? And the answer is, well, you blackmail each other, right? So you do acts together that would be considered taboo, including sex with underage children. I mean, there are lots of transgressions that you can do, and the more transgressions you do, the more cohesive the elite is. So unfortunately, if you dig deeper into Jeffrey Epstein, what you'll find is a lot of transgressions, both sexual and violent as well, breaking these social taboos. I mean, like the public. I mean, what's really astonishing about the Jeffrey Epstein case is that slowly the inner workings of the elite are being revealed to the public, and all these conspiracy theories that we once believed couldn't possibly be true, including that the entire American elite are just a bunch of pedophiles. I mean, they're slowly turning out to be true, and this marks a radical turning point in American history.
Yeah, great point. And to that end, in terms of how flippant all of this is, and there is this email that's been the most recent emails that have been going around. What is so incredible about them is that the more that they are released in this weaponized way, the more we find out. And here is one between Epstein and between Epstein's brother Mark and him, talking, how are you doing? This is what they're saying. How are you doing? What is your boy Donald up to now? Referring to Donald Trump. Mark Epstein says, all good. Bannon is with me. So Steve Bannon. Then Mark says, ask him if Putin has the photos of Trump blowing Bubba. And I thought I had Surus. That's what Jeffrey Epstein said. What that means? That's a Yiddish word for trouble. You and your boy Donnie can make a remake of the movie Get Hard. This is how they're talking to each other on an unsecure server, Professor Jian, talking about Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. I mean, this is shocking a lot of people, but maybe you can reiterate or reinforce or elaborate on kind of what this really reveals about all of this. What's going on here? Because what I see is a dying American empire kind of just being exposed without real, not by journalists, not by people doing the work, but by themselves.
Well, I mean, we also have to remember that Jeffrey Epstein, in his Manhattan penthouse, there's a painting of Bill Clinton in a dress, in drag, basically. So one possible interpretation is that all these politicians that we think are our representatives, they're all just the playthings of the elite. They're just puppets of the elite. They're just paid actors. They're literally paid actors. And so American democracy has always been a lie. And so Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, they just do the bidding of the powerful. And the powerful are, in their parties, secret parties, laughing at us, mocking us, because they've been able to deceive us. And we every day are fighting over these petty politics that has absolutely nothing to do with real power. So I think that what these Epstein emails reveals is the deep contempt that the elite has for the people. And these politicians are nothing more than just these puppets that the elite display in front of us in order to distract us. Everything's being curated by the powerful. And so what we see in Washington D.C. has never been more than a reality TV show.
Yeah, great points, Professor Jian. And it goes deeper than this, because I think one of the things that is left out of this conversation has been, we're going to be touching this a lot throughout the program, Israel, because we have to remember this was a limited release by the House Oversight Committee, by the U.S. government itself, a major I guess a slight Democratic Party majority. So really, it was a partisan thing, despite how much the emails really showed. But I want to pull up what emails are not being emphasized, and I want to pull up this one in particular, talking about how Epstein was effectively drafting foreign policy messaging for former Israeli PM Ehud Barak, who many believe was really instrumental in the Epstein they had a very close relationship. I would use the opportunity, says Jeffrey Epstein, to compare it with Iran, talking about Syria. The solutions become more complex at the time I see. I think many people would like your views on Egypt, Syria, etc., Russia's role. I think you might point out that gassing of women and children is an expression of the 20th century. Women are no longer equivalent children, civilians versus combatants, only literally giving advice, Professor Jian, on how Jeffrey Epstein giving advice on how Israel should paint its, U.S. foreign policy. I mean, talk about this. I think this really blows open the realities of these relationships and how it gets all the way to the level of empire.
Yeah, so the first thing we need to understand is that power always consolidates and coalesces. And what I mean by that is that these intelligence agencies, Mossad, CIA, MI6, they're all, they're all interlocked together. They're all in alliance together. That's the first thing. Second thing is that these intelligence agencies are also in alliance with different secret societies as well as criminal organizations. So from the perspective of people like someone like Jeffrey Epstein, he's the real power in the world. And that's why he thinks that he can dictate foreign policy to everyone. Okay, so I don't think Jeffrey Epstein was actually a spy. I think Ghislaine Maxwell, his girlfriend, was actually the spy. And one good piece of evidence for that is that Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, was a notorious spy, and he was working for Mossad, MI6, as well as Russian intelligence, the KGB. So that's how the powerful works. The powerful are almost like a nexus of all these intelligence agencies, foreign governments, secret societies, and criminal organizations. And so they discuss amongst themselves how to best frame issues and how to best push events. So, from the perspective, if you look at more and more of Jeffrey Epstein's emails, what you would discover is that he was privy to a lot of geopolitical events, and in fact, he was actually helping to plan a lot of geopolitical events as well.
Yeah, and let's go dive more deeply now into some of these power players that were revealed to be very close to Jeffrey Epstein, where he was literally talking about them with Kathy Rumiere, who is Obama's on Obama's legal counsel, White House counsel. He says, girls, when talking to her, careful, I will renew an old habit. Mind you, she says, you might get sick of me, just sat down on this train. You're not managing your time well enough. It's UN General Assembly week. He says this week, Peter Thiel, Larry Summers, William Burns, former CIA director, Gordon Brown, a former UK Prime Minister, Jagland, who is a Nobel Peace Prize chairman, was Mongolian president. He's just naming people, Boris Gates, Bill Gates, everyone who he has contacts with, who he meets with, and says, I might I might renew an old habit. Just your response before we move on.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, it's obvious that everyone in power, they're friends with each other. They know each other. So this sort of like struggle between nation states. It's all just a curated media show for us. It's not. It's actually real. What goes on behind the scenes is that these powerful people are all friends. Okay, so even though there's wars going on between Russia and Ukraine, guess what? The elite of Ukraine and Russia, all friends. Guess what? The elite of Europe and Russia and Ukraine and America, they're all friends. They go to the same parties. Their children go to the same schools. They're probably intermarried with each other. So that's really how the world works. And as more and more of these Epstein files are released, the more and more we will discover that the elite is all interconnected. They're just playing us for fools. that I think is the ultimate message of these file release.
Yeah, and Professor Jian, in your works, you have called America, where while Jeffrey Epstein seemingly was working for Israel, he was working within the United States and tugging on all of the most powerful people, to the point where he was, I mean, a lot of people have been bringing this up. He had all of this dirt on Donald Trump, and then he ended up dead. Could you talk about the given that we know Jeffrey Epstein was a major player in driving U.S. foreign policy, was majorly connected, and was likely conducting some kind of what seemed like a blackmail operation. Talk about why. Why is this necessary from the point of view of the power elite, those who are ruling over this empire? Because we have major connections to Israel, major connections to this decaying American empire, that now Donald Trump is looking like the kind of the leader that's falling on the sword, so to speak, that he is being absolutely he is being dragged almost as the antichrist figure in all of this.
Yeah. So the first thing to note is that Jeffrey Epstein is not unique. You go to any major American city, I guarantee you there is a Jeffrey Epstein-like figure coordinating among the city's different politicians, celebrities, mafia organizations, secret societies. Okay, so Jeffrey Epstein is a very common character in today's world. Now, why is that the case? Well, okay, so let's look at today's world, and I will highlight 3 structural issues with today's world. Okay. The first major problem with today's world is the atomization of society, meaning that we focus on the individual, whereas before, in previous societies, we focus on the family, the tribe, the clan. But nowadays, we've all been atomized, we've all been individualized. That diminishes our capacity to work together for the pursuit of certain political ends. Okay, that's the first major problem in today's world. Second major problem in today's world is globalization, multiculturalism, transnationalism. So people's sense of ethnic identity has been dampened. It's been diluted, and so people are less willing to work for a cultural cohesive cause. Okay, that's the second major problem. The third major problem, which is the most major problem, is the bureaucratization of society. You look at the growth of the federal government in Washington, D.C. Then you look at the growth of the EU superstate in Europe. So our lives have become more and more bureaucratic. The problem with this is that bureaucracies are indifferent. They're aloof. They're compartmentalized. Okay, so all these different departments are siloed off, and they cannot coordinate together. So in today's society, you have a problem of coordination. How do you get groups to work together? Well, you get them to work together mainly for secret societies. And because secret societies solve 3 major problems that would benefit the members in today's society. The first is secrecy, second is trust, and the third is coordination. Okay, so secrecy, because you don't want to be discovered. If you are discovered, people would think that you're cheating in this game, and then you would be outlawed, you'd be persecuted. Trust is, how do you trust members of your society not to rat you out? And the third is, how do you work together for a common cause, coordination? And the solution to all 3 problems is, of course, blackmail. So you need someone like Jeffrey Epstein, and there are lots of people like Jeffrey Epstein, to help the elite coalesce together through blackmail by engaging in acts of transgression, whether it's ritual sexual abuse of children, which is very common. But look, there are actually even worse forms of transgression. I'm not going to go into them because they are disgusting and vile, but we've all heard rumors of this transgression. So that's why we have blackmail today. That's why someone like Jeffrey Epstein is everywhere in society. And that's why we need someone like Jeffrey Epstein, because the only way for the elite to work together is through blackmail. Otherwise, they don't trust each other. Otherwise, they'll go to war with each other. So something I will say with regard to Donald Trump is that people forget that Trump's first mentor and his most influential teacher was actually Ray Cohn. Okay, if you look at Ray Cohn, if you look at history, he was actually the original Jeffrey Epstein. He was part of the Washington gay mafia, and he specialized in blackmailing politicians. He was very good friends with J. Edgar Hoover. They went to each other's parties where they engaged in all these sort of like homosexual endeavors, and they had pictures of each other. So Roy Cohn was the original Jeffrey Epstein, and he was the mentor of Donald Trump. So what did Donald Trump learn from Roy Cohn? He learned how to blackmail other people, but most importantly, and this is really important for us to understand, is he learned how to avoid being blackmailed. So another thing that I will say about Donald Trump is that he's a teetotaler. He does not drink. This is really weird because we've known him as a playboy ever since the 1980s, and he's always dating these beautiful women. He's always throwing these lavish parties. He's always hanging out with the most famous, the most wealthy, and he himself, even though he's organizing his parties, does not touch alcohol or drugs. Why? Because he learned from Roy Cohn, that's how they get you. Okay. The worst thing that can happen to you is blackmail. So I guarantee you, these emails that are coming out, there's no dirt on this guy. If there was any dirt on this guy, Donald Trump, we would have seen it in 2016 or 2020 when the elite spent $6 billion to get rid of Donald Trump. Okay. So I'm telling you right now, there's absolutely no blackmail on Donald Trump. I'm also telling you that blackmail is just the way of life among the powerful.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about this, from what you're saying then, Professor Jian, is that Donald Trump has been melting down about this. So I guess we can talk about why, because we've seen now there's a lot of conversations that have been happening since early on in this Epstein saga. You know, the Trump administration promised to release these files and then broke that promise. And here is what some people are bringing up. Here is he had many run-ins with the mainstream media about this. Here's just one.
Mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the set?
Yeah, sure. If I
Could I just interrupt for
Sure.
1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
So that was his response there. But this has had a major impact on what many are calling the MAGA base. And it has been angered by this. And Trump has lost many prominent figures, including Candace Owens, who commented on this situation. Here it is.
Seems to have been hiding these emails. They're not good. Okay, they are completely indefensible, but I already told you, I was done with MAGA at the moment he looked us in the face and he said, what files, right? What are we still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? Pam Bondi said it was a Democrat hoax. No, I think the entire nation has been hoaxed by Republicans and Democrats, and there are a pervert elite that sit at the top.
So that was her response, Professor Jiang. You know, given if there is no dirt on Trump, why would he hide it then? Because in the emails, what it was proven was that he had deep associations. Of course, we don't have proof that he took part necessarily in any of the activities beyond the fact that it seems like Virginia Giuffre was saying that she didn't want to run into Trump should Jeffrey Epstein not be there. So your assessment.
Yeah, so we know from news reporting that Epstein and Trump go all the way back. They've known each other ever since the 1980s, and they used to be best friends. Epstein was a frequent visitor to Mar-a-Lago, and they had a falling out because Trump believed that Epstein was stealing his workers to go work for himself, and so they had a falling out. And there's actually rumors that Trump was one of the informants that landed Epstein in trouble with the law in the first place, and this is back in the early 2000s. So Epstein and Trump had a falling out. Okay, so that's something that we know. That's number one. Number two is that it's, as you say, it's really interesting that Trump doesn't want to talk about Epstein. In fact, he's done a lot to suppress the Epstein files. So why would he do that? So, okay, now let's do a thought experiment. It's really important for us to do a thought experiment to understand what's going on. The year is, so we go back a year. Donald Trump has just won the presidency. And let's just assume what a second term would look like. We would think that in the business world, Elon Musk would be his main backer because Elon Musk gave $100 million to Trump's campaign, right? We would also expect that in the media, there would be three individuals that would be most supportive of Trump: Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. Okay, and we can also expect within the U.S. Congress, Trump would have some diehard supporters that would do whatever he wants. Okay, and the two that would come most readily to mind are MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, as well as Lauren Bobbitt. Why? Because during the first term, these two were the most diehard Trump MAGA supporters. Okay, so that's what we would expect. Now, what is the reality? The reality is that with Elon Musk, he had a falling out with Donald Trump. You know, he had a black eye, then he left the White House, and after he leaves the White House, he has this tweet, and he's basically like, Trump's in the Epstein files. Mark my words. Okay, that's kind of strange. Then you have Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson turning against Trump, and in fact doing as much as possible to embarrass the Trump administration. Now you look at Congress. These Epstein files are being released because four Republican members of Congress have sided with the Democrats in voting for their release. Okay, and these four Republicans are Thomas Massie, Nancy Mace, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Lauren Bobbitt. In fact, what we know is that Penn Bondi had a very long meeting with Lauren Bobbitt trying to tell her, hey man, don't switch sides. Don't vote for the release of these files. The president will be very angry at you, okay? So this is really weird. The people that we expect to most support Donald Trump in the second term have now turned against him. This makes no sense because what did Donald Trump do to piss these people off? So, and also, like, as I keep on saying, there's absolutely no blackmail on this guy because a guy like Donald Trump, he has been breaking a law in his entire life and getting away with it. So he knows how to skirt the law. He knows how to not get in trouble with the law. And he knows how to be careful about someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who cannot keep his mouth shut, okay? So I don't think there's any dirt on this guy. I'd be very surprised if the Epstein files implicate Trump in any manner. I understand, yes, Trump is named a lot in these files. I understand that, yeah, Trump likes to be seen with underage girls. Like, I mean, he was in charge of these like Miss Teen USA pageants, okay? So there's nothing really surprising about these Epstein files. So the question is, why is this happening? And I have a theory, okay? And this theory can be completely idiotic, okay? But I would propose this theory. It's all a show. It's a Trump show. It's all an illusion, okay? These Epstein files do not implicate Trump, but he wants to create a spectacle around the Epstein files. You know, he was part of the World Wrestling Federation for a long time. He had his own TV show, The Apprentice, for a long time. So he understands TV show plotting. He understands how to maximize an audience emotional reaction to a certain event. What he's doing is creating tension, right? He could release the Epstein files like many months ago, and we would go over the Epstein files and we'd be like, what is this crap? This tells us nothing that we don't already know. We know Bill Clinton, we know Bill Gates, we know Larry Summers, we know Jamie Dimon. We're all part of the Epstein circle, and they all visited Epstein Island. We know all this, right? So how do you create a visceral hatred for the Democrats and for the elite among the people. What you do is you create as much tension as possible by making this Epstein files as seemingly secretive as possible. But not only that, but you create a situation in which the people are begging for the Epstein files so that when new information comes out, they become more and more agitated. They become more and more violent. That's what we're seeing today, okay? So remember what's happening. Remember what's happening is that while the House Oversight Committee, the Democrats are releasing more and more files, with Trump being implicated, Trump has announced that they will launch an investigation of Bill Clinton and his ties with Epstein. And before, people would be like, this is partisan. Trump is clearly going after Democrats. But now people are like, oh, well, this makes sense because we want more information released about Epstein. Release all the files, okay? So this is all theater. This is all an illusion. Trump is not implicated in the Epstein files, but Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Larry Summers, Jamie Dimon, the main leaders of the Democratic Party in many ways, and it's possible that eventually John Podesta will be implicated as well. Okay, we're seeing Trump slowly use lawfare to go after his Democratic enemies. And it's quite honestly, it's entirely possible that one day Trump will use lawfare against Obama as well. So I know this sounds strange. I know it sounds like conspiracy theory, but just look at the facts before you.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting take, Professor Jian. From what I see from these emails, while they don't, I think a lot of people are seeing a smoking gun on a lot of these emails, given that Jeffrey Epstein was hanging out with him during his presidency, was in the Trump Tower. So many things have been revealed about their relationship. And Jeffrey Epstein in these emails himself said that, he's the dog that's barking, so to speak, around this particular victim. So it would be interesting, but at the same time, it's a very limited release. So we don't necessarily know everything, and we don't know how far this goes. But we do know that Donald Trump was in the Situation Room right after this, trying to discipline his, colleagues like Lauren Boebert, who is a representative in Congress. They're voting on releasing these files. And it seems like the Trump administration was trying to discipline her to not go along with this, and she ended up rescinding. So would you say that this is all theater? Because it does look like we are being taken down this road of these files are in the conversation. The problem for Donald Trump is that it actually is hurting him quite badly in terms of his own base. You said Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, these folks are going against him now. They are, and they are a lot of the reasons because of this, because he didn't fulfill this promise to release the files. Your thoughts?
Look, it's all tension and release. It's all theater, right? Because you look at World Wrestling Federation, okay? People love those who they hate, and people love redemption story, okay? So Trump, he's got 36% approval ratings, and his base has turned against him, and Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Dave Smith, all talking trash about him. But so what? What does it matter? What matters is in 2028, that election, that's what matters, because Trump has the intention of running for a third term. That's the key, okay? Also, what's key is that we can expect more political violence in America over the next few years. The sort of political consensus it's broken down. There's this major infighting among the elite that these Epstein files are revealing to us. So Trump needs a street army on his side. And what he's doing is that he's messaging to the MAGA. Listen, the real enemy is the elite. The elite has me cornered. Okay, the elite has blackmail on me, and that's why I'm begging for help. Like there's nothing I can do. If Netanyahu wants me to go bomb Iran, I can't do anything about it. If the deep state wants me to go bomb Venezuela. I can't do anything about it. I'm being held hostage. Save me, okay? That's slowly the message being sent to his base, okay? And I know this sounds weird, but what we need to understand is that, look, watch a football game or watch a basketball game. These athletes are superstars. They're able to do things that are unimaginable to us. These politicians, Donald Trump, MTG, Thomas Massey, they're able to have a sixth sense of political winds, of how America, the mood in America is developing, and how to best manipulate it through nuance. Okay, they're able to ride that wave. So again, I know this sounds crazy, but like, let's see how things play out over the next few months.
Yeah, no, I mean it. Look, this is a moment right now, and it looks really bad. This is one of the worst, I think, starts to a presidency in a long time. But at the same time, we were talking about this. There's elites pulling strings for real policy, which I think we can get to now. What isn't being talked about and at all, really, when it comes to these emails, and that is the role of Israel. And I want to pull up this. Professor Jian, Caitlin Johnstone, great journalist, does great analysis, pulled up a bunch of headlines that, stories that have been coming out in recent weeks, many of them from Drop Site News, and I'll just pull them up here. Israeli spies stayed for weeks at a time with Jeffrey Epstein in Manhattan. Leaked emails show Epstein working on a wire transfer to Ehud Barak's top aide, Yoni Koren, who regularly stayed at his apartment. Jeffrey Epstein helped broker Israeli security agreement with Mongolia. Jeffrey Epstein and the Mossad. How he helped Israel build a back channel to Russia amidst serious war, although there was no real back channel that was proven to be, but there was talks about it. Jeffrey Epstein helped Israel sell a surveillance state to Cote d'Ivoire. So, Professor Jiang, this is what isn't being talked about. Help us understand then the role of Israel in all of this. What is the true power dynamic, the true power relationship? Why is it turning out like this? And why are these Epstein files so important to understanding all of this?
So Israel is a very complicated issue. And again, I'm going to go on a limb and give everyone a controversial take. The Jewish identity, the Jewish people, is a creation of empire. It's a construct of empire. So I know this. So let me slowly explain what's going on, and please be patient, okay? So the Jewish people, the term Jews, came from the Persian Empire, and I would argue that Israel is a construct of the Persian Empire. Okay, so I know that in the Bible, the Bible says that the Jews come from Abraham, who lived like 4,000 years ago. But if you just look at the real history, Israel was a creation of the Persian Empire. Why? Well, because if you look at a map, at that time in history, the Middle East was the wealthiest part of the world. You had Anatolia, you had Egypt, you had Mesopotamia, you had the Mediterranean and the Aegean. And the center of this world was the Levant. So whoever controlled the Levant controlled the world. Cyrus the Great, he had just conquered Babylon, and he discovered that there were these captives from the former state of Judah. These are the proto-Jews. And the policy for the Persians is divide and rule. Okay, so to create as much these instability in a border area as much as possible as to maintain control, right? Because if the region is unstable, the empire has reason to exert control, but also, much more importantly, you prevent another power from arising within your borderlands. So at this time in history, this would be up the year 500 Common Era, Judah and Samaria were pretty peaceful places. There were Jews, Israelites, who had converted into the local polytheistic religion. At this time in history, most people in that area was polytheistic, and people got along really well. They intermarried together. And then along comes this guy, Ezra, okay? And he's the governor, who is sent by Persia in order to recreate the Jewish identity. Okay, and he immediately proclaims that if you're a Jewish man and you want to still be Jewish, you must divorce your wife if you marry into a different religion. Okay, and this creates a lot of conflict. This creates a lot of instability. Ezra is the one who gives us the modern day Bible because he needs to construct this Israel identity. Now, why is this important? This is important because this is the same trick. This is the same strategy that the British will use when they become an empire. Okay, so at this time in history, they are since 1700, 1800, Jerusalem, the Levant, is being controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so the Ottoman Empire is a great geopolitical rival to the British. So how do you destabilize the Ottoman Empire? Well, you promote Zionism. Okay, you promote the idea that this land is the promised land that God promised to Abraham, and therefore the Jews have a right to it. And at first, this idea wasn't very popular, but then starting about 100 years ago, with the publication of Theodor Herzl's book, Fatherland, in German, calling for the creation of a Zionist state, then it started to gain more and more traction. Okay, so this is what we have to remember. Israel is a construct of empire in order to destabilize the region. And Israel has been doing a great job of that. Before the arrival of Israel, before the Zionist project, Jews in the Middle East got along really well with Muslims. In fact, throughout history, it's the Christians that were mainly to blame for the persecution of Jews. The Muslims have always been protective of Jews. So in 1492, when the Spaniards expelled the Jews, it was the Ottoman Empire that took them in. The Jews, climbed to positions of power and authority within the Islamic Caliphate. They've always been well respected. Going back to the 1950s and the 1940s, the Jews were welcome in Baghdad. They were welcome in Tehran. They were welcome throughout the Middle East. But the Zionist project is being fueled by anti-Semitism, and they need manpower. So the Zionists were conducting all these terrorist attacks in Baghdad. The Jews no longer felt safe in Baghdad, so they start to immigrate to Israel. So that's something that we have to keep in mind, that Israel is the pit bull of empire. It's a construct of empire in order to destabilize the Middle East, and that's what Israel is today. America is using Israel in order to destabilize the Middle East, in order to maintain control over the oil resources, the trade routes, Jerusalem, which is the holy city for the three major Abrahamic religions. So that's why we keep on hearing about Israel.
Jeffrey Epstein has long been considered an Israeli intelligence asset of some kind. I'm curious on where that factors into all of this, given his extensive involvement with some of the most important people, most powerful people, dictating U.S. foreign policy, dictating empire, and of course, using channels like Israeli intelligence in all of this. Your thoughts?
Look, Jeffrey Epstein was definitely Mossad operative, but he was definitely a CIA operative, and he could have been an operative for the Russians, for the British. Okay, so the way that these spies work is that they're all double agents, triple agents, and that's why they're so effective, because they're able to be a nexus of different power elites. So definitely Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad operative, but did he have loyalties to Israel? Maybe, maybe not. Was he good friends with Israel? Absolutely. But people like Jeffrey Epstein, they're all psychopaths. They're first and foremost loyal to themselves, and they use their power, they use their connections in order to amass more and more personal power to themselves. Look, the reality is that America is turning against Israel, and there's no stopping this. And I think one thing that we'll see over the next few years is a surge in anti-Zionist settlement in America. And this Jeffrey Epstein will be a catalyst for that. And you know what? The American people are absolutely right in that their foreign policy should not be held hostage. Their foreign policy should not be dictated by any foreign nation. It makes absolutely no sense that AIPAC is not registered as a foreign agent in America. So I think that one thing that Donald Trump will do in the next couple of years, possibly sooner, is that he will ask for AIPAC to be registered as a foreign agent. And this will create a firestorm in American politics that we've never seen before.
You know, Professor Jian, as all of this drama around, you know, we have MAGA splits, Candace Owens, these types moving away from Donald Trump around Epstein. As the emails came out, U.S. President Donald Trump begged for a pardon for Benjamin Netanyahu. He pardoned a major billionaire, a former Spurs owner, British billionaire who, you know, was involved in insider trading. How do you think all of this factors into what's going on here in the current atmosphere? Is the U.S., you call the U.S. Or America anti-civilization? Is this anti-civilization going up in smoke?
The American empire is definitely in decline. So let me respond to this Trump-Netanyahu relationship. So what happened was that after the Gaza ceasefire, Trump flew to Israel and gave a speech in the Knesset. And he singled out two individuals. The first is Benjamin Netanyahu, and the second is Miriam Adelson. And what he said is that, hey, guys, we should give Benjamin Netanyahu a pardon, man. And then Netanyahu got to send in an ovation. You look at Netanyahu's face at that moment, he was mortified. Because what Trump was implying is that Netanyahu is starting all these wars around the Middle East in order to not go to prison. Okay, so Trump made a point of embarrassing Netanyahu in the Knesset in front of the entire Israeli people. Okay, then he also singled out Miriam Adelson. He told a story of how he once had a conversation with Miriam Adelson, and he asked her, "Do you love America or do you love Israel more?" And Miriam Adelson would not answer. And Trump said to the Knesset, again, in front of the entire nation, in front of these live cameras, he said, "Oh, well, this tells us that Miriam Adelson loves Israel more." Okay, so he's basically saying that Miriam Adelson is a traitor to America. This is not complimentary. Trump is basically trolling his biggest supporter, Miriam Adelson, as well as Netanyahu, so I mean, if you are just watching what's happening, you don't think that Netanyahu and Trump are friends. In fact, you think that they absolutely hate each other. So it's a very complicated relationship. And so what's really going on, I think, is that you have a decline of empire. I mean, as you say, and when an empire declines, what often happens is the elites attack each other. Okay, so Peter Turchin has a theory called elite overproduction, and this is what explains the decline of empires. That you have too many people who want these too few positions of elite status in which they can extract rent from everyone else. So in other words, a way of saying this is that everything that Trump is doing is ultimately to target the deep state, to reveal who they are, okay? To reveal who they are, what they want, and how they work, so that the American people can rise up and overthrow the deep state. Now, maybe this is all just conspiracy, but if we understood in this way that Israel is a pet project of the existing deep state, and Trump wants to overthrow the deep state, so he wants to create all these problems for Israel, that can help us understand a lot of what's going on. Because remember, the people who are most attacking Israel in the media, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, they used to be adamant Trump supporters. So why are they never falling out? Also remember that Candace Owens is blowing up on the internet because of Charlie Kirk, right? And what she's implying is that Israel is was responsible for the Charlie Kirk assassination because Charlie Kirk didn't want Trump to bomb Iran. Okay, that's what she's implying. So a lot of sentiment is turning against Israel. Also remember that what's happening right now is that Larry Ellison has bought TikTok, which was for the longest time one of those weird platforms in which you can criticize the genocide in Gaza. His son has bought CBS, Viacom, and installed Barry Weiss, a very well-known Zionist, as editor-in-chief of CBS News. Okay, so this does not seem like Israel is gaining power in America. It seems more like desperation. It seems like more like they're being revealed, they're being attacked, and they feel as though they have no choice but to defend themselves. So it's almost like a fight or flight mentality. So we are seeing, I think, the end of Zionism in America. I really think that these next 2 to 3 years, there'll be a concerted attack against Zionism in America, which implicates the deep state, okay? Because the deep state is first and foremost a Zionist organization. The deep state and Zionism are almost intermarried with each other. So if you attack Zionism, you're also attacking the deep state as well. So I think that's what's happening.
Would you say then, based on your take here, that people like Candace Owens, for example, their opposition to Trump, which they say is because of Epstein and also because of Trump's inability to stop the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza, would you say that those reasons that people like her, Tucker Carlson, have given are disingenuous? Like it's not the stated reason, that there really isn't a reason why they should be breaking from Trump? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, look, the Epstein emails tell us that journalists are political operatives, right? So if you look at Michael Wolff, you look at Thomas Landon of New York Times, they were basically acting like political strategists for Epstein. Okay, so, for someone like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, to reach the level of fame and power that they have in America, they need to be able to read the political winds properly. Okay, so I'm not saying that Donald Trump and Candace Owens talk on the phone and discuss strategy. They don't do that. But Candace Owens has a read on Donald Trump. He has a read on his intentions. She reads the political winds in America. She knows where the MAGA base is going. And she positions herself in a position that allows her to speak the truth in a way that is also political advantage to her. And that's why they're so successful, because they're able to have a sixth sense of where the political winds are shifting and how to best position yourself in a certain place that allows the wind to ride you to success.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tucker Carlson's history, he has a history of being close to, if not an operative of the CIA, especially during the years of the U.S. dirty war in Nicaragua. So that history is never really spoken of. So for me, while it's understandable that these figures can play a positive role for especially those who follow them in opposing things like Ukraine, Iran war, Gaza, yeah, it wouldn't be a surprise to me if all that was political wins, because they jumped on it when things were going south, and that sentiment was already there, even if they've built upon it. But please.
No, I mean, look, Tucker Carlson, his father was CIA operative, right? And he's trying to keep it secret for a long, long time. I mean, like, I think in an interview he once said, said that he really doesn't know what his father does. Like, how do you not know what your father does? Does. Tucker Carlson was for the longest time trying to pretend that his father was a journalist. Okay, so his father was a CIA operative, but also much more importantly, he was very high up in the CIA. Okay? He was part of a major CIA faction. Tucker Carlson grew up in that sort of environment. Even today, he's probably very close with the CIA. I mean, as you mentioned, in his 20s. He once went to Nicaragua, and he had this picture of a gun standing with CIA operatives, and he was very proud of that. When he interviewed Putin said to him, "Hey, I know that you once applied to the CIA and they rejected you." They don't reject a son of a CIA operative. what the CIA probably said to Tarka is like, you're probably more useful to us if you worked as a journalist, right? Everyone sort of Operation Mockingbird, and a CIA project to embed journalists into the media to better control, right? So someone like Bob Bernstein of Watergate fame. I mean, I'm sorry, Bob Woodward. I'm sorry. Bob Woodward. He is clearly a CIA asset. If you just read his books, if you look at his role in Watergate, okay, this guy who's like in his mid-20s, graduated from Yale, was probably in Skull and Bones, joins the Navy, is a naval intelligence officer. He quits that and he joins the Washington Post Metro section. Guess what his first assignment is? It's Watergate. Who the hell does that? Who the hell gets assigned Watergate as his first assignment? No reporting experience, no connections whatsoever, and this guy gets Watergate. So the media, it's all CIA. I'm sorry, it's not all CIA, but you know what I mean. Like a lot. There's a lot of media that's CIA.
I mean, Operation Mockingbird, right? I mean, that's a classic reality that we need to definitely fess up to. Well, before we close on the story and move on to a different one, Professor Jian, maybe summarize how your research really can help us explain this particular moment, not only with Epstein, but also this kind of crumbling of the Trump administration. And of course, this larger problem of the U.S.'s declining power.
I mean, the reality is that America is an empire, and never before in human history has an empire done any good in this world. So let me explain what I mean. If you look at historically the three ways in which people get rich, okay, what are three major sources of wealth? Well, they are slavery, okay, which includes human trafficking, prostitution. It includes debt, which includes gambling and finance. And the last thing is drugs, narcotics smuggling. So you look at the Opium Wars, in which basically Britain turned China into a slave state. That apparatus never went away, right? Because you need a very sophisticated apparatus to run that sort of operation where you enslave an entire nation using opium. That apparatus became the financial centers of the world: Hong Kong, Paris, New York, London. So that's what finance is based on. It's all based on money laundering for drugs. And that's what an empire is. An empire exercises power, creates wealth through these three major mechanisms. So an empire is a nexus of organized crime, secret societies, intelligence agencies, the most evil, powerful people in the world. So that so now that the American empire is declining, we should be celebrating, okay? Because hopefully there'll be less evil in the world because of the decline of empire. At the same time, what we do know is that when empire declines, it never goes peacefully, okay? It clings on to power in a way that could cause the entire world to be destroyed. So and that's what we're seeing today. That's why we're seeing these wars all around the world right now.
Yeah, well, you've covered Iran in particular, that war that nearly blew up into a world war. Some say that World War III is ongoing. But Professor Jian, I want your comments on, there are major escalations relating to Venezuela right now. And I just want to pull up what Secretary of War Pete Hegseth had to say about it, recently announcing Operation Southern Spear, led by the Joint Task Force Southern Spear and Southcom, the U.S. Southern Command. This mission defends homeland, removes narco-terrorists from our hemisphere and secures our homeland from drugs killing our people. The Western Hemisphere is America's neighborhood. We will protect it. So sounds familiar. Sounds like the Monroe Doctrine, Professor Jian. And then I just want to pull up some of this buildup here. We have major U.S. destroyers coming off of the coast of Venezuela, now even operating in Venezuela's exclusive economic zone, just 50 kilometers from the capital, Caracas. 20 boats have been struck in the recent period by the Trump administration, killing dozens, and men and governments like Colombia saying that those who survived and came back to shore and were, legally tried, they weren't they weren't narco-terrorists, or narco-terrorists, whatever that is. They were, poor laborers. Professor Jian, talk about this coming war. It's what's your assessment of it? Where does it fit within the overall context? Maybe even if you want to bring in game theory, your assessment of where this fits. It reminds me a lot of Iran, to be honest. But please, your thoughts.
Right. So we have to remember that this Venezuela affair, it comes right after Trump's meeting with Putin in Anchorage, Alaska in mid-August. So after that meeting, Trump starts to deploy destroyers towards Venezuela. And as you say, there's just gradual but very forceful buildup of naval power right now off the coast of Venezuela. So that's very curious. Why would that happen? Why would it that Trump is trying to negotiate peace in Ukraine? He's met with Putin, and we can assume that there'll be more meetings. But what's happened instead of moving towards peace is that Trump has deployed destroyers to Venezuela, but also, much more importantly, we see a Russian breakthrough in Ukraine. So the entire Ukrainian front lines are collapsing. It seems very much that NATO have no choice but to come into the war at some point in order to shore up the front lines of Ukraine to prevent a complete implosion. So this is all very curious. Now, I don't know why this is happening, but I do find the timing very suspicious, okay? That's point one. Point two is that no one has figured out why this is happening, okay? So we can say it's for oil. But look, the reality is this. The reality is that if you're America and you need oil, you can buy it from Venezuela really, really cheap. It is much more problematic. It is much more expensive, much more consequential for you to invade a country to steal its oil than to just, buy off the elite and bribe the elite and steal its oil, okay? That's what America's been doing for the past 100 years. It's worked out really well. So why would you go invade Venezuela? Also, the oil issue is problematic because oil is actually pretty capital intensive to refine in Venezuela. You need a lot of pretty high-grade technology. It's very capital intensive. It's labor intensive. It's cost prohibitive, and that's why Venezuela has not risen to the ranks of great oil powers in the way that Saudi Arabia has. So I know that Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, but it's pretty hard to access, pretty expensive to access it. So the oil thing doesn't really make sense. Now, some people say, well, it's just geopolitical in that, Russia is about to win the war in Ukraine, and so America needs to show off its hegemony by beating up Venezuela. Well, yeah, I understand that argument, but it doesn't really make sense either because, who would take you seriously if you go invade Venezuela? Also, remember that Venezuela, it's mountainous. So it's very hard to invade and occupy and defend Venezuela. So you could go and attack Venezuela, that's fine, but what does that really get you? And also, it could turn into a quagmire where you have troops in Venezuela, and they are attacked by guerrilla warfare, by asymmetrical warfare. So from a military perspective, attacking Venezuela doesn't really make any sense. It really doesn't get you anything, okay? Also, if you attack Venezuela, you're going to create a dumpster fire in Latin America because you still have to deal with Cuba. You still have to deal with Nicaragua. There are lots of enemies that the United States has to deal with in Latin America. Latin America is a huge place. Do you really want to send millions of soldiers to occupy and colonize Latin America? So it doesn't really make any sense what's happening. So let me offer you an explanation, okay? And I don't know if this explanation makes any sense, but I'm going to offer you my explanation, and we can just wait and see what happens to see if this theory makes any sense, okay? So the Trump administration says that they're doing this to stop the flow of drugs into America. Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, well, that's retarded because most of the drugs is coming from Mexico or Canada. It's not coming from Venezuela. This makes absolutely no sense. Okay, but let's just assume that what Trump says has validity, that in fact they are targeting drugs. Well, why would they do that? So a theory is that this is part, again, of the elite civil war going on in America right now between the nationalists and the globalists. Remember, I just said that an empire engages in drug smuggling as a way to generate wealth for its elite members. And drug smuggling is a very important component of the global financial economy, right? Because City of London, Wall Street, Hong Kong, Dubai, they're all designed really to launder money. So when you attack drug flow, when you stop drug flow, that creates a lot of problems for the elite. So, okay, given that we have this theory, how can we test it out? Well, if this theory makes any sense, then one, I don't think the United States will actually attack Venezuela. The point of this huge naval presence is actually to disrupt the drug smuggling going on. Okay. Second is that I think Trump may turn his attention to the Mexican cartels, because that's where the real money is, right? These Mexican drug cartels that are really controlled by the CIA and the global deep state and the financial elite of the world. So I think that I cannot possibly imagine the United States launching a ground invasion of Venezuela. It would make absolutely no sense. I could foresee, though, operations against Mexican cartels. So that's what I think, and I could be completely wrong. Okay, I'm just speculating because like I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
Well, let's keep up with this. You know, the Trump administration has said they're pondering land strikes, right? They're pondering all sorts of options on the table. But they've been doing this for quite a long time. I mean, we're talking about weeks now, weeks and weeks and weeks, foreshadowing. What do you make then of what some have said is kind of another attempt to knock off another chess piece in this larger building multipolar world? Because Venezuela's relationship to Russia, to China, to Iran is pretty strong. And even Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, has been talking a lot about this. What's your thoughts on this? And then we can get into some of the consequences after this. I have something I want to show you, but please, first this.
Yeah, so I hate to say this, but I don't think American policymakers, American foreign policy elite, they think that far ahead. I think the problem with Washington, D.C. right now is that it's become very bureaucratic, very corrupt. So it's always like short-term interest. In other words, let's not think about how the United States benefits, but let's ask ourselves how a certain faction of the American policy elite benefits from an attack against Venezuela. Now, we know that if America were to attack Iran, well, this would benefit a lot of political factions within the U.S. deep state. Okay, so you have the Zionists, you have the financial elite who want to better control trade in the Middle East. You have these oil interests. You have the military-industrial complex. So I don't know which faction the American foreign policy elite would actually benefit from a war in Venezuela. So that's how I see the world. I mean, like another way of saying this is the conflict within nation states is far more intense, far more violent, and far more important and significant than the conflict between nation states. Okay, so I think that what's happening in Venezuela, it's even more like conflict within Washington, D.C. as opposed to geopolitical calculations against Russia and Iran and China.
Now, I want to show you something, Professor Jian, because there are major consequences to all these wars. I know you've talked a lot about the consequences of what will happen in a possible war with Iran. And Venezuela seems to have some of these elements to it, especially this point that you made about how people, the military occupation or an invasion could have major consequences on how people view, the United States in this region. And I want to show this. This is a video of Nicolas Maduro. As there is literally basically a bounty on his head, the United States is actively attempting to regime change him, which often means kill or kidnap. Here is Nicolas Maduro.
13,000 U.S.
Wrong video. Let me remove that. Here we go. This is why StreamYard has become absolutely unusable. Here we go.
What is your message to the people of the United States, President?
To unite for the peace of the continent. No more endless wars, no more unjust wars, no more Libya, no more Afghanistan.
Do you have a message for President Trump?
My message is yes, peace. Yes, peace.
And it's so interesting, Professor John, because a lot of people who are pushing, especially the I will call them the MAGA AstroTurf section of the social media class, they've been saying, look how weak he looks when he's in the middle. I mean, he has a bounty on his head. The CIA has announced that they have operations inside of Venezuela, and he's walking around amongst people saying no war, no, we don't want war. We don't want this to be another Libya, which had a big blowback effect. Talk about what could be the blowback effect here, because Pete Hegseth is talking about almost like Monroe Doctrine 2.0 on steroids. I don't know how that would go down in Latin America should this occur. What's your take?
Listen, if we assume that Donald Trump is interested in igniting a civil war in America, if Donald Trump were interested in accelerating the collapse of the American empire, then that helps us explain exactly why he's doing what he's doing, right? Because as you say, when you send off this massive naval force and threaten the people of Venezuela, what they will do is they will rally behind their leader. And this leader will become almost invincible. Now, but not only that, but many Latin American countries will rally and support Venezuela as well. You're almost like uniting all of Latin America against the U.S. empire. So why is Trump doing this? I don't know. Okay, but like one data point is, remember, like during the Canadian elections, Mark Carney was the Liberal candidate, and Donald Trump said, "Hey, we should make Canada our 51st state," and he was joking about annexing Canada. And Mark Carney, who was he's leader of the Liberal Party, and the Liberal Party has been in power in Canada for like 10 years, and they're extremely disliked. Okay, Canadians just hate the Liberal Party, but because Trump was saying this crap, okay, he's saying let's annex Canada, Carney surged in the polls, and he's still in power. The Liberal Party is still in power. So you're like either this guy, Donald Trump, is the dumbest guy in the world, or he's the smartest guy in the world. Either like the guy's completely incompetent, or he's playing like five-dimensional chess, right? So if you just assume that Trump wanted to instigate a civil war and he wants to accelerate the collapse of the American empire, then what he's doing around the world makes perfect sense, right? So I'm sorry.
No, yeah, no. I mean, it is really interesting because with Venezuela too, there is this other element as well. Marco Rubio, for example, having huge political connections to those who hate the Venezuelan government, who hate the Cuban government, who hate any government that espouses any sovereignty at all. They hate Marco Rubio doesn't, and the people in Miami. So there's a lot of elements here. I'm curious on where it fits within also this larger picture of the U.S. as an empire, not really able to get what it wants. Do you find that it could be that Venezuela is simply being calculated here as an easier target than, let's say, an Iran, which failed dramatically in June of 2025, the 3+ year proxy war in Ukraine not going their way? I mean, China, forget about it. You predicted here that there would be a détente of a kind, and right now it seems there is at the very least, while there's still aggressive, I don't think we can ever say the U.S. empire will not be aggressive toward countries it doesn't like, but on this trade issue it had to cave pretty badly, and we see a pause there. So where do you think this all fits?
Look, look, you're absolutely right in that if America wanted to invade Venezuela, it would take 2 weeks. The American naval power is overwhelming. They could completely destroy all of Venezuela's air defenses very quickly. But what does that get you, really? It just makes you a pariah state, right? The entire world would be disgusted by your actions. China, China, Iran, Russia would be much more popular. They would come together. They would coalesce more in response to the violence, the random violence of the American empire. Global opinion would completely turn against America. BRICS would be a lot stronger. The Iranian people would be much more prepared and united in case America were to attack. Also, you couldn't possibly hold Venezuela because the Venezuelan people would fight for their freedom. They would die for the freedom. You would have all this guerrilla warfare. It'd be like another Vietnam. So yeah, you can destroy Venezuela and you can replace the government. You can kill Maduro. It's not a problem. It's very easy for the American empire to do this. But it puts you in a very, very difficult position. And it becomes a quagmire. And not only that, but like once you do Venezuela, then you're kind of stuck doing Cuba and Nicaragua. And it just becomes a cascading effect. And then the American empire just needs to occupy all of South America and Latin America. And maybe it will. Okay. But if it were to do that, then the American empire would collapse very quickly. Because one, America doesn't have the manpower, the resources, the political will, the manufacturing capacity to actually invade all South America and to occupy it. That's number one. Number two is the American people would rise up and revolt against you because they're the ones being sent to make these sacrifices. They're the ones who have to pay these taxes to fund these forever wars. And three is that if you were to do this, you'd be isolated from the rest of the world. Europe, Russia, Africa, Asia would see America as a pariah state, and they would basically impose trade embargoes against America. America would lose its authority, its empire in the world. So it would be counterproductive to go invade Venezuela. I'm not saying they won't do it, but I'm just saying that if it were to do this, then the consequences would be dire.
Yeah, they definitely would be dire. I'm hearing something like there are millions of Venezuelans who are being armed right now to defend their country if there is an invasion. I mean, that alone should give pause because we've already seen how bombing, right, just bombing a country like, for example, Iran, that seemed to be more theater because there wasn't really any possibility to do more. With Venezuela, you're talking about a country that's right smack in the middle of the backyard for the United States. And that means every other country is going to be wondering what happens to us if we don't do what the United States likes. And does that mean we need to find another path? What do you think about that?
Look, if you bomb Venezuela, Venezuela's not going to sit back. They're gonna strike back, and they might, destroy a U.S. destroyer, and so it'll be slow mission creep. It'll be provocation. The United States would find itself embroiled in a war. And you're absolutely right in that if the United States were to attack Venezuela, all of South America would unite and rally behind Venezuela because they would know that we're next. Brazil, Argentina, Chile, they're not just sit back and wait for the American empire to come after them, because they know that once they go after Venezuela, they would have broken a consensus. They would have broken an understanding that's lasted for hundreds of years. The Monroe Doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine says that the Western Hemisphere belongs to America. But at the same time, the Monroe Doctrine implies that America is a protector of the Western Hemisphere, and so it doesn't go around and invade the countries of the Western Hemisphere. If America were to actually launch an invasion of Venezuela and occupy the country, then that would compel response from all South America.
Yeah, and all of South America is not necessarily aligned here. I mean, we have many different situations with every country, and as it stands, that wouldn't be the case. But things change a lot when there's a major U.S. Intervention.
Look, if you threaten a people's national sovereignty, if you destroy their dignity, their freedom, their sense of independence, they will respond violently. We've seen this throughout history. You go back and look at Vietnam. Before the invasion of Vietnam, before the American presence in Vietnam, we couldn't possibly expect a sort of courageous response from the Vietnamese people. And remember, like, it was not really the North Vietnamese, it was not really the Chinese or Soviet Union that defeated the Americans. It was the Vietnamese people themselves that defeated the American military. Why? Because they love freedom. And all people are like that.
Yeah, and they were ready to be done. I mean, they kicked out the French. They had elected a president. They had a government. Right after World War II, they had it. I think it was August 45. And then it wasn't too long afterward that they no longer had it. With the U.S., the UN coming in, the U.S., the French, etc. French at the back end helping the U.S. Professor Jian, my final question to you then is, where are we on this World War III situation, right? Because that's really where all of this appears to be going. There are bigger players that the U.S., it seems, can't really touch right now, or at least can't touch in the way they want to. Pardon the reference, given all the Epstein talk we've been having, but they can't do anything with them to a significant degree, affect an outcome. But where are we in this World War III nexus, so to speak?
Yeah, so I would say the major flashpoint in the world right now is what's happening in Ukraine. The reason why is that the Ukraine front lines has collapsed. Russia has had multiple breakthroughs this past week. The city of Prof has fallen, which allows Russia to control the Donbass region. And the Donbass is important because it is the agricultural industrial heartland of Ukraine. So in effect, Ukraine has lost the war. And there's really no way for Ukraine to come back. They lost anywhere between 1 to 2 million fighting age men in this war. Millions of Ukrainians have fled the country and they will never come back. The Zelensky government is plagued with corruption. There's news that this past week, someone who was very close to Zelensky has fled Ukraine for Israel, and he was notorious for being corrupt. And that's not just one person; it's an entire regime. Okay, you've got these dozens of high-level military officers in Ukraine that have benefited tremendously from corruption in the war. So Ukraine is lost. The war is lost. The problem is that if Ukraine is lost, if NATO admits to losing this war, then there's a threat that there'll be a political earthquake throughout Europe, because NATO and Europe has invested heavily in this war. And they literally expect that Ukraine will win this war and they can just collect reparations from Russia. They froze in $200 billion of Russian assets in European banks. So they cannot afford to lose the war. They cannot explain to their people how, for the past 4 years, in the media, there's this narrative that Ukraine is about to march all the way to Moscow. And then suddenly, oops, sorry, we were lying to you. We were gaslighting you. Sorry, we've lost the war. So the political elite in Europe cannot withstand a loss. The Zelensky government could not possibly withstand a peace. So we can expect this war to accelerate. We can expect NATO to send in more forces to shore up the defenses of Ukraine. Remember that NATO officers, NATO special forces, NATO weaponry are already in Ukraine. But we can expect that over the next few months, these volunteers will be sent to Ukraine to fight with the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army has collapsed. Okay, you're talking about like 100,000 of desertions. So what I'm watching, and I think what everyone should be watching, is what happens in Ukraine for the next 2 months. The real concern is that NATO involves itself in a war, and if it does that, it cannot extricate itself from the war. It's all or nothing. The other thing that we have to remember is that the Western model of funding a war is through debt financing. Okay, so like the example is you look at the Napoleonic Wars, right, where basically the Bank of England was financing all these European powers to fight France, and that led to like 7 wars. Why? Because even though Napoleon was defeating all his enemies, the Bank of England could not afford to admit defeat because it would mean that the entire debt would be wiped out, and the entire nation of England would be wiped out. So it's all a Ponzi scheme. Europe has invested heavily in this Ponzi scheme, in this war in Ukraine. And if it ever admits defeat, then the entire Ponzi scheme collapses and all of Europe collapses as well. So we can expect a massive escalation of war in Ukraine over the next few months and next year.
Well, that seems to contradict Donald Trump's promise to end the war at, forget 24 hours at all. I don't know if you saw, and we're about at the end here. The United States is considering deporting Ukrainians, and Ukraine is saying they're going to use those Ukrainians at the front lines. It's an absolute embarrassment, really, for Ukrainians to have been living in the U.S. And these Ukrainians are said to have committed crimes, immigration status, whatever. But if they're deported, and then maybe we'll never hear about them again. But they're deported. The government, Zelensky, they're all saying, yeah, we need men for the front line. I mean, look, this is how bad it's getting.
Look. The reality is that there's a high possibility of a revolution in Ukraine. There's a high possibility of a coup d'état in Ukraine because the military feels betrayed by Zelensky and the Americans, the Europeans. Look, the reality is that we shouldn't have been in this war in the first place, right? Putin and Zelensky had a deal like 3 years ago. Then Boris Johnson flies into Kiev and says, hey, man, don't worry about Russia. We will finance you. We'll give you all the weaponry you need to defeat. Russia's a paper tiger. You fight them. Russia will collapse. You'll march to Moscow. You'll overthrow Putin. And then you'll be the hegemon of Europe. So all these promises, all these guarantees were made to the Ukrainian people. Ukrainian people have lost millions of people in this war. They've lost their country. They lost their nation state. If there were ever a peace, I guarantee you that elements of the Ukrainian military would stage political assassinations against people like Zelensky.
Surprised that hasn't happened already, Professor Jian. This was a great conversation. I want to make sure that everyone knows that your Substack is in the video description before we head out of here. I also want to let everyone know to hit that like button before you head out of here. And lastly, I want you all to know that I do have Mark Sloboda on 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So I'm putting that link in the chat right now and the video description, and it will be public right after this show is over. So we will be talking even more deeply and even more with more time on what's happening in Ukraine. So that is going to be there now. That show is in the video description. So, Professor Jian, anything you want to say, final words before we head out of here?
No, it's always fun talking to you, Danny, and I hope to do this again. And
yeah, of course.
And I'm just as confused as everyone right now as to what's happening. Okay, but again, I say that if you just work with the assumption that Trump, for whatever reason, wants to instigate a civil war in America and wants to accelerate the collapse of the American empire, a lot of things make more sense.
Professor Jian, thank you so much. Everyone, we're going to head out of here together. Hit the like button before you go. And be sure to catch Professor Jian's Substack. Be sure to catch the link to the stream for tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, November 15th with Mark Sloboda. And also be sure to find all the places to support this channel, Patreon, Substack, and much more. But hitting that like button will keep this stream going after we are done. And without further ado, see you tomorrow afternoon. Bye-bye.